Pickle.
It's Math Tuesday.
That's terrible branding. Nobody's going to want to do that. Nobody's going to want to click on a video
I
that
promise.
says Math Tuesday.
No, when you were gone, that's what we kept saying, that we do math on Tuesdays, and all the nerd crew flocked together, and that was like our most watched show every week. Math Tuesday.
All right, I guess welcome to Math Tuesday here on Texas Football Today. We're going to go inside the numbers. We're going to talk a little bit about offense. You know, last week we talked about teams that were the most improved teams in Texas high school football. We want to drill down a little bit deeper. And I want to start, there's a piece up on TexasFootball.com that I wrote. And not to brag, but
whatever.
But I want to start with this. Mallory and I went back and watched this. Mallory and I did a segment back in July about how the offenses were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Offense took a pretty serious hit back there. They went from they basically dropped about a full 1.5 per game.
If you're not a run-heavy team, that doesn't surprise me at all. How are you supposed to build chemistry?
Across the entire state is pretty huge. It's a pretty seismic shock there. And one of the things that we were pretty careful about in that clip was we wanted to make sure that we weren't saying it was definitely from the COVID-19 pandemic because we didn't know.
Right.
I think it's fair to say now that it's from the COVID-19 pandemic.
After looking at the numbers for this year?
Back, because we saw a return to form from there. For example, in 2020, there were 1,222 UIL Texas high school football teams that played in both 2020 and 2021 because there were a few that didn't play in 2020, etc.
Right.
In 2020, they averaged 26.7 points per game.
Okay.
In 2021, it was to 28.4. Okay, scoring was up 6%. Yeah. That across an entire state like that is
with that
massive.
Many schools to take pull from.
With that data group to go 6% more is pretty shocking. So offense was back in 2021. That's for darn sure. It's not just, and what I'm talking about, I'm not just talking about the Rockwall and Rockwall Heaths, right? I'm not talking about those big high-flying offensive games. I'm talking about the average game.
Right.
The average game just had about two more points in it, which across the entire state, across all those games, is pretty massive. Now let's take a look at the teams that made the biggest leap, okay? And if you take a look at the numbers, what I think is most interesting is six-man football kind of dominates this. They dominate them. In fact, I believe it is 10 of the top 25 most improved offenses in the state were six-man teams. Whiteface, in fact, 4 of the top 5, Whiteface, Mount Calm, Trent, Cranfill's Gap, all jumped by more than 26 points per game.
Wow.
Whiteface improved by 31 points per game. Okay, they went from 22.3 points per game, which is, by six-man standards,
really low,
pretty paltry, to 53.3,
which is contending in
pretty
basically
good.
Any game.
Pretty good, exactly right. As far as 11-man is concerned, when you get to 11-man, Tioga was the clear favorite here.
Oh, Chad Rogers.
Chad Rogers, in his first year there, we sat here, we talked about why did he leave Denison to go to Tioga? Well, obviously he is building something there. They increased their scoring average by 26 points a game.
Wow.
That's shocking. To go from 10 points a game to 36 is pretty impressive. Roscoe is the same way. And I think a lot of that comes back to having, and by the way, with some of these teams, Whiteface most especially, and then a team like Roscoe, you can pretty clearly point to 1 or 2 youngsters who joined. Okay,
right.
With Whiteface, they had a pair of freshmen in Ethan Kaufman and Jeremiah Rendon, who really stepped up. 2 freshmen. And Roscoe is Jax Watts, the sophomore quarterback, who really sparked that offense there for the Plowboys. They averaged more than 25 more points per game in 2021 than they did in 2020. As far as if you narrow this down only to 11-man teams, the top 5 would be Tioga, Roscoe, Levia, who Levia is interesting. They were really hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
They didn't play all their games.
They didn't play all their games, but they did improve by 25 points a game. Toller and Shamrock were there. As far as 6A is concerned, the biggest jump was 6A was Odessa. The Broncos, the Bronchos, went from 7 points a game to 31 points per game. Awfully impressive there from there. In 5A, it was Fort Worth Wyatt. In 4A, it was Rockport Fulton. Okay. In 3A, it was Tulia. And then at 2A, it was Tioga. what I think is interesting, if you take a look at the 11-man ranks, the top 5 are all 2A teams. Tioga, Roscoe, Levia, Toller, and Shamrock. And what I think that speaks to is when you get down to those lower levels, and we see it in the state championship games, we see it deep in the playoffs, if you have that one guy, if you can have one extra guy, it makes that much more of an impact at the 2A level. I found that to be particularly interesting. If you are interested on the other end of the spectrum, the teams that took the biggest dip were Brooksmith, Sherilyn Pioneer, Hamlin, Petersburg, and Chillicothe.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
The
Eddie Lee Marburger impact was real. Pioneer was down 32 points a game this year.
I mean,
pretty shocking.
Wow.
Other ones that I think are a little bit interesting, we talked about Little Cypress, Mauriceville. They were up by 21 points a game. Buda Johnson was another team that made a big leap. Groover
really?
as well. Yeah, Buda Johnson went from 21.2 points per game to 43.5 points per game.
Oh, I'm thinking of Buda Hayes. I was like, they made it to a state semifinal last week.
Team.
I was like, how?
You're thinking of the other Buda team. And so, I found this to be a little bit interesting. And it looks like all offenses across the state, for the most part, like as a whole, offense did take more of a center stage in Texas high school football in 2021. But there were these other teams that really made that big leap. And again, I think a lot of it comes down to having youngsters who are jumping into starring roles for these offenses and doing big things. Obviously coaching matters as well. That's one thing that I found particularly interesting here was these teams were taking big leaps. Oh, I'm sorry, I should put some respect on their name. San Antonio McCollum also made a big leap. They went from 1.9 points per game in 2020 to 26 points a game. That's pretty impressive.
That's Math Tuesday for you.
Math Tuesday, right there. They were tied with Wyatt for top in 5A. So there you go. You can find the piece on TexasFootball.com. I've got the top 25 most improved UIL Texas high school football offenses. I'm working on a piece for the defenses here, which surprise, surprise, some of these teams have a little crossover on some of these. I was putting that together today, but you will have to wait until next Math Tuesday for us to talk about the most improved UIL Texas high school football defenses.
That's a legitimate tease right there.
That's a vertical tease. Hey, thanks for watching this clip here on YouTube. If you like this kind of stuff and you want more of it, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And remember, you can watch us live every weekday at noon at TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, or here on YouTube. And if you want more of the best coverage of football in the state of Texas, check out TexasFootball.com and become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football Insider at TexasFootball.com/subscribe.